Good evening and welcome. Tonight we're going to read some articles out of History Magazine. And as you can tell by the title, they all involve World War I. You can see from here that we will be talking about the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This article is really interesting because it's actually mostly about the guy who shot him, Gavrilo Princip. And then we're going to read this neat little article about the Hello Girls, who were translators for the American soldiers in France. Pretty neat story there. But these articles were chosen by my channel members. Quite a lot of them wanted these. They were chosen by Zoe, Lucas F., Craig, Luna, Smola, Alessia, Sophia, Cricket, Vectas, and Chris W. Thank you all so much. And if you watching this would like to pick future History Magazine articles, you can click the join button right down there, somewhere down there, or you can click the first link in the description box. That'll take you to my channel members page where it's only 99 US cents, the lowest possible price it can be. If it could go lower, I would make it lower so that more people would be able to join. And you get all kinds of things for that, not just picking articles from History Magazine. You get very exclusive videos where you guys get to pick the topics. The only way you can pick topics when it's not viewer's choice in December. You get to watch all of my videos early before the general public. You get your name in every video. You get special emojis when I go live. There's all kinds of bonuses. You get behind the scenes videos, all kinds of stuff. So I'd love to have you join. That would be wonderful. But let's talk about some dark topics here in World War I. Franz Ferdinand being assassinated, you can see there, which sparked World War I. Let's get into it. Of course, we'll read all these pages after we read the main article. On a sunny morning, on Sunday, June 28th, 1914, the fates of two men collided with world-changing consequences in the city of Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Nothing could have suggested their paths would ever cross. One of the two was Archduke Franz Ferdinand, a member of the monarchy and heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The other, 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip, came from a humble family, but despite his apparent powerlessness, Princip had one all-consuming mission: to strike a blow against the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, which had annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina 6 years prior. The young firebrand dreamed of shaking the monarchy to its core and stirring up Bosnian Slavs, whether Serbs, Croats, or Muslims, to rebel against their Austrian occupiers. Princip's plan to assassinate Archduke Franz Ferdinand was extremely audacious. The heart of the matter. When he was born in 1863, Franz Ferdinand was third in line to the throne, and no one had expected him to become ruler of a powerful empire. Sickly with tuberculosis during his 20s and early 30s, it seemed more likely he would die young. He didn't. Others, however, did not fare so well. The Archduke's cousin Rudolf, son of the aging Emperor Franz Joseph, and first in line to the throne, died of an apparent suicide in 1889. Then Franz Ferdinand's father, Archduke Karl Ludwig, the emperor's brother, who was next in line, died of typhoid fever in 1896. Suddenly, Franz Ferdinand was Franz Joseph's successor, just as the Austro-Hungarian Empire began facing an existential crisis. Emperor Franz Joseph governed Austria and Hungary, splitting his empire into a dual monarchy. The two entities only had the monarch and the ministries of war, foreign affairs, and finance in common. They were otherwise a fragile unity. What kept that unity from unraveling was the political dominance that the Austrians and Magyars held over the other peoples of the empire. However, the rise of Slavic nationalism focused on Bohemia to the north and Serbia to the south, which threatened the fragile status quo. Bosnia and Herzegovina was becoming a tinderbox. The roots of this volatile situation stretched back to 1878, when the Russian victory over the Ottoman Empire gained provinces in the Caucasus. Emboldened, Balkan states, including Serbia, declared war against the Ottomans in 1912, stripping the empire of nearly all its European territories. The Serbian leaders cherished the dream of a greater Serbia that would include all the Slavs of the Balkans within its borders. However, this vision was severely shaken in 1908, when the Austro-Hungarian Empire annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina. According to international agreements, this region had been under Austro-Hungarian guardianship since 1878, though it was still formally Ottoman. It was on Bosnia and Herzegovina, with its mixed population of Muslims, Croats, and around 43% Orthodox Christian Serbs, like the Princip family, that Serbia's nationalist ambitions became focused. The people of Bosnia and Herzegovina considered the annexation an affront. Their discontent hardened into fervent nationalism, which in 1911 led to the founding of the Serbian Nationalist Society Unification or Death, better known as the Black Hand. This secret society was led by Dragutin Dmitrievich, also known as Apis, an army officer with a stellar military career behind him. The Black Hand's goal was to unite Serbs by any means necessary. So I might mispronounce some Serbian names. My bad. I'm not intending that on purpose. If I do mispronounce, my bad. In 1907, Princip, 13, left his native village of WWI for Sarajevo to study. Princip felt incensed by the annexation. His anger was fueled by the injustice he saw around him, the precarious living conditions of the community to which he belonged. 6 of his siblings died in infancy, and the lack of political rights. Like him, hundreds of young people opposed Austro-Hungarian colonial rule and longed to take action. Many were part of Young Bosnia, a network of groups promoting resistance against the authorities in Austria-Hungary. Direct action. To many members of Young Bosnia, violence seemed a legitimate response to the oppression they faced. One such act by a Young Bosnia member laid the groundwork for Princip. On June 15, 1920, 24-year-old Bogdan Jerajic fired 5 shots at the governor of Bosnia and Herzegovina on the Emperor's Bridge over the Miljacka River in Sarajevo. But Jerajic missed, and with his last bullet, he took his own life. For Princip, Jerajic became an example of devotion to the liberation of Bosnia. In Sarajevo, Princip immersed himself in various revolutionary literature, socialist, anarchist, and nationalist, and attended student demonstrations against foreign rule. However, it seems he cut a rather lonely figure, always remaining an outsider. His increasing involvement with politics started to get him into trouble. In 1912, he took part in an anti-Austrian demonstration and was expelled from high school. That same year, Princip went to Belgrade, the Serbian capital, to complete his schooling. It was there that the young rebel chose to become an assassin. By now, Serbia was championing Balkan pan-Slavism. Belgrade attracted young people who came there to study and also to express their political leanings. Many of these young people enlisted as irregular combatants in the Balkan Wars of 1912 against the Ottomans and 1913 against Bulgaria, from which Serbia emerged with twice the population and territory. Princip tried to enlist in 1912, but later claimed that he was rejected for health reasons. He went on to live a meager existence in Belgrade, along with many other students and Bosnian ex-combatants from the past two wars. He told investigators later, "Wherever I went, people took me for a weakling, and I pretended I was a weak person, which I was not." Then the moment arrived for him to show his true colors. The plot. In March 1914, Princip read, I think that's a typo, Princip read in the press that the Archduke would travel to Sarajevo to inspect military maneuvers. His friend, Nedeljko Čebrinović, also read a similar newspaper clipping, which he showed to Princip. Čebrinović had reportedly stated that Princip suggested they assassinate Franz Ferdinand when he came to Sarajevo in June. But time was short. Princip needed accomplices, weapons, and money in order to cross from Serbia into Bosnia without being picked up. He chose two Bosnian Serb comrades in Belgrade to help him. His initial co-plotter, Čebrinović, a typesetter, and Trifko Gabrej, a student. Everything else would come via the Black Hand. But despite the support that the Black Hand provided, it was 19-year-old Princip who came up with the plot, amateurish as it was, and drove it forward. Astonishingly, it succeeded. Princip got hold of the weapons through Milan Ciganović, a former Bosnian Serb combatant linked to the Black Hand. Ciganović, in turn, had gotten clearance from the Serbian commander Vojislav Tanković, a major player in the Black Hand. Apis, the leader of the Black Hand, would later state that the Black Hand had been responsible for the entire plot. There he claims that Princip had been a member of the organization. However, in fact, his political goals were distinct. The Black Hand wanted the unification of the southern Slavs under Serb hegemony, but Princip envisioned a state that would welcome Serbs, Muslims, and Croats on an equal footing. Ciganović provided the three would-be assassins with 6 bombs and 4 pistols. He took them to a forest where he taught them how to shoot. He also provided enough money to pay for their trip to Sarajevo. The young men set out from Belgrade on May 28th. Thanks to maneuvers by the Black Hand, the Serb customs officials looked the other way as the group crossed the Drina River into Bosnia. When they arrived on the western bank, Bosnian Serbs helped them on their journey southwest to the city of Tuzla. From there they continued by rail, arriving in Sarajevo on June 4th. Previously, Princip had written to Danilo Ilić, who lived in Sarajevo and was a member of Young Bosnia, asking him to find more accomplices for the attack. In May, Ilić recruited 3 more people: a Bosnian Muslim carpenter in his mid-20s, Mohamed Mehmedbisic, and 2 students, Vaso Chibrilovich, age 17, and Zhivjetko Popovich, 18. Mehmed Basic had already been involved in a failed Black Hand plot to kill General Oskar Potiorek, a governor of Bosnia and Herzegovina. On June 14th, Illich collected the weapons, which Princip had entrusted to a businessman from Tuzla. However, as time went on, Illich had doubts about the attack. He wondered if it might unleash even more suffering for the Serbs under Austro-Hungarian rule. Illich discussed with Princip whether political action might be more effective than terrorism. Ultimately, he was persuaded to go ahead with the plan for the sake of his friend. The attack. On June 28th, Franz Ferdinand and his wife, Countess Sophie Chotek, Duchess of Hohenberg, were scheduled to attend a reception at Sarajevo City Hall and visit the local museum. They arrived in Sarajevo from Ilija, a nearby spa town, and were scheduled to travel in their motorcade on Apel Quay to City Hall for a reception. This wide avenue is next to the Miljacka River, which divides Sarajevo in two. Along the route, 6 armed men, Mehmed Basic, Chibrilovich, Chabrinovic, Popovich, Princip, and Gabrej, mingled with the crowd that had turned out to see the royal couple as they passed along the Apel Quay. To engineer a sense of closeness between the crown and the Bosnian people, the army had not cordoned off the route. Additionally, the local authorities had mobilized only about 150 police officers. It was a risky move, and the possibility of an attack hung in the air. That threat had prompted the Countess to accompany her husband to Bosnia in the first place. The motorcade of 6 vehicles passed in front of Mehmed Basic, who stood primed and ready with his bomb. But he didn't detonate it as planned because a police officer was reportedly in the vicinity. Chabrinovic, the next to get a chance, hurled his bomb at the 3rd car in the motorcade where the Archduke was traveling. Franz Ferdinand's helmet, topped with green-dyed vulture feathers, made a useful target. But the bomb ricocheted off the canopy at the back of the car and fell to the ground, exploding as the next vehicle passed by, injuring several people. It was 10:10 a.m. The motorcade sped up, making it impossible for the other 4 men to get a decent aim. Chabrinovic tried to escape by jumping into the Miljacka River. Like all the terrorists, he was carrying cyanide, which he then took in a bid to kill himself rather than be captured. But the poison only burned his mouth and throat, and Chabrinovic was caught and arrested. Despite the attempt on his life, the Archduke tried to appear unruffled. The couple attended a reception at the city hall. However, a decision was made to modify their route. The Archduke and his wife didn't enter the city to go to the museum as originally planned. Instead, they drove along the Apel Quay to the hospital and visited those wounded in the attack. However, the change of plan to divert to the hospital was not properly communicated to the Archduke's driver. Once they reached Franz Joseph Street, the driver turned right. On the corner at Apel Quay, next to the Moritz Schiller Café, Princip stood quietly, waiting for the motorcade to pass. Military Governor Oskar Potiorek, also in the car with the royal couple, saw the mistake in the route and yelled at the driver to back up. But putting the car into reverse was not easy. It involved first reversing the drive belts, a procedure that took some time. Princip saw his chance and fired twice, one shot at the Archduke and another at Potiorek. The first bullet hit Sophie in the abdomen. The second bullet hit Ferdinand in the neck, severing a jugular. Those around him did not realize what happened at first, as the blood was pumping out under the tunic of his uniform. Franz Ferdinand and the Countess were mortally wounded, dying within minutes. Princip swallowed his cyanide and then aimed the gun at his head, but the weapon was snatched from his hand before he could pull the trigger, and the cyanide would prove not to be fatal. Mehmed Basic managed to flee to Montenegro, but the other 5 participants in the attack and those who had helped them in Bosnia were all arrested. Ilić was hanged, while the others were spared capital punishment due to their age. Čebrinović and Princip later died in prison from tuberculosis. The incident gave Austria-Hungary an excuse to attack Serbia, causing a shift in alliances among the European powers. A chain reaction was started, propelling Europe into the First World War, the most extensive conflict the world had experienced up until that time. Well, let me see if there's anything. Oh yeah, there's more. How much did Serbia know? Ooh, let's read this. Also, I tried to fix the lighting so the glare wasn't so bad, but it's impossible because this paper is so glossy. There's going to be a glare no matter what I do, but I tried to reduce it. Was the Serbian state behind Princip's plot? If it was, Austria could justify its aggression against Serbia, an act that led to the outbreak of war. The Austrians probed links between conspirators and the Black Hand, and then links with the Black Hand and the Serbian army. It seems that Serbia's Prime Minister, Nikola Pasic, knew something was afoot and tried to warn Vienna via Leon von Belinsky, Austria's finance minister. Von Belinsky was told that the Archduke might want to avoid visiting Sarajevo, given the inflamed passions in Bosnia and Serbia. Belinsky replied, "Let's hope nothing does happen." This blog says the conclusion. Should I start with the conclusion? I don't know. I guess so. I don't know. I haven't read this page. Let's see. The conclusion. You can see the trials right here. Ooh, I'm sure they'll point out who's who in this little box over here. It says the investigation by the Austrians could not prove that the Serbian government was involved in the assassination or knew much about the plan in any detail. The Austrian investigations also failed to clarify the precise role that the Black Hand had played, although they did identify Zhiganovic and Tankosic as accomplices. The state. In June, Nikola Pasic, pictured here, was reportedly aware of the conspiracy. Border guards were ordered to be on the lookout for Princip, Gavrilo, and Čebrinović, but it was reported that it was too late. They were already in Bosnia. The assassins. A photograph shot in Belgrade, Serbia shows Princip right here and Gavrilo right here with Milan Čikanović, who supplied the conspirators with arms. Siganovic. There's Čebrinović and Siganovic. Siganovic was a close associate of Black Hand leader Major Vojislav Tankosic, a senior officer in the Serbian army. The Black Hand. The Black Hand did not appear to mastermind the plot, but offered support needed to carry it out. Black Hand members had infiltrated the Serbian army and police to such an extent that Pasic's government was unable to prevent weapons and terrorists from entering Bosnia. And there's their super cool looking insignia here. It's kind of rad with the skull crossbones in the middle of this little pennant. Alright, let's see. There are 25 defendants. Trial started October 12th, 1914, lasted for 11 days. It doesn't say who's who. Interesting, but they're all sitting here. Chapel of Remembrance. Princip died of tuberculosis in prison in 1918. His remains were transferred to Sarajevo, where they were interred in a common grave. In 1939, the Chapel of the Holy Archangel was built. It received the remains of Princip and others, including Grabež and Čebrňović, involved in the 1914 assassination plot. An inscription reads, "Blessed are those who live forever. They were not born in vain." Also, they have their own little memorial for being assassins who started a war. That's interesting. This is the chapel that houses the remains of Princip and other conspirators located in St. Mark's Cemetery in Sarajevo. You can go visit his grave in Sarajevo. It's interesting. Čebrňović and Princip, along with others involved, are taken to the court where the trial for the attack will be held 4 months later. And someone wrote on this photo, marking number 1 right here is Čebrňović, and this is Gavrilo Princip. Wow. This was taken 1806, so June 18th, 1914. It says. Interesting. Look at the people in the window watching them go by. It says, with luck on their side. Princip's success is usually credited to luck. The plotters had minimal experience handling weapons. Princip, Čebrňović, Mohamed Mehmedbesic, and Trifko Gavrilo had received only basic training in the use of pistols. While it isn't clear who trained Yevtechko Popovich and Vaso Čebrilović, Shiganović specifically taught Princip and Gavrilo how to shoot in the woods near a rifle range with the Browning pistol. And there's a photograph here of some onlookers looking at the spot where the bomb had blown up earlier that day. And then this is a picture of the car. Goodness. 1910 Graf and Stift double phaeton. And it's kept in the Museum of Military History in Vienna. Wow. It says a linguistic muddle and a lucky shot. The Archduke's drivers were Czech speakers who apparently failed to understand the orders to change the route, issued in German. The vehicle stopped right in front of Princip. Hemmed in by the crowd, he decided against detonating the bomb and fired his pistol twice at close range. The first bullet entered the Duchess's abdomen, severing a gastric artery. The second tore one of the Archduke's jugular veins. Before dying, Franz Ferdinand reportedly whispered to his wife, "Sophie, don't die. Stay alive for our children." Well, that's sad. There's a photograph of Princip being arrested here. And then there's a painting of the assassination attempt. I can see Sophie being like, oh, like leaning away. So now I had heard that after the first attempt, they thought that they had lost, and so Princip went to go get a sandwich at the cafe, and then as he was coming out, the car rolled up and stopped right in front, and he was just like, well, I guess this is it. I don't know if that's true, but that was the story I heard. Here's a beautiful photograph of Sarajevo today. Let's see. Crucial defense, and then in 1992, which Bosnia has been a constituent republic since 1945, the city once again engulfed in violence. That's so true. Sarajevo's been through it. Now it's a beautiful, bustling, lovely city. The long shadow of Apis. Looming over Princip as he hatched his assassination plan was the impressive figure of Dragutin Dmitrievich. In 1903, Dmitrievich and several fellow army officers assassinated the King of Serbia, Alexander I, and his wife for their increasing closeness to Austria-Hungary. In the course of the assassination, Dmitrievich was wounded. 3 bullets remained lodged in his body. Nicknamed Apis, he became increasingly powerful within Serbia, founding the Serbian nationalist movement, the Black Hand. His primary objective was to incorporate Bosnia and Herzegovina into Serbia. Apis helped foment guerrilla activity against the Austro-Hungarians. Princip received aid from the Black Hand, so it is likely that Apis directly participated in the plan to kill the Archduke. And there's a photograph of him here looking very formal in like military uniform. It says it was taken around 1900. Down here is the murder weapon. A semi-automatic Browning FN model 1910 made in Belgium and carried by Serbian army officers, and it's also in the Museum of Military History in Vienna. Here's a cool map of everything. Let's follow it here. It says the Archduke's planned route ran along the Appel Quay, the avenue where Princip and his companions are waiting. The visit began with a brief stop at the city's military barracks right here. Then continued along the Appel Quay to the city hall over here. On the way, the Archduke and Sophie, Duchess of Hohenberg, faced the first attempt on their lives right here. So they drove, there was the first attempt, and they went here to the city hall. Next to the Chumaria Bridge. After leaving City Hall, they were killed here at Latin Bridge, victim of Princip's bullets. Wow. And here is a photograph of the Archduke and Sophie in the car. It says moments before the assassination. What an eerie photograph. Probably their last photo, right? Goodness. It says Bogdan Jerajic, the martyr. After an unsuccessful attempt to assassinate Governor Marian Verashinin in 1910, Bogdan Jerajic, a member of Young Bosnia, took his own life and was buried in an unmarked grave in Sarajevo. But the burial place was soon located, and it became a pilgrimage site for young Bosnian rebels. Both Gavrilo Princip and Nedeljko Čebrinović visited the grave the night before their attack. Wow. And I guess that's him right here in this photograph. Surrounded by part of the Serbo-Bosnian resistance. Wow. I mean, it's a pretty great photo. This is a gold medal that was awarded to, I guess, the Serbians, commemorating victory over the Ottomans in 1912. It's pretty great. The Archduke's political vision. Sorry for my cat out there. Ruled by Franz Joseph I, Austria-Hungary comprised two governments, one in Vienna and the other in Budapest. The compromise was an attempt to accommodate the nationalist demands of Hungary within the empire. Franz Joseph's heir, Franz Ferdinand, resented the power the dual monarchy gave Hungary. He envisioned incorporating the Slavs of Bosnia as equals with the Austrians and Hungarians. He hoped this would encourage the Bosnian Slavs to drop the separatism promoted by other Slavs in Serbia, and in turn act as a counterweight against Hungarians. So I guess he wanted it to be Austro-Hungarian Bosnian Empire, I guess. It says there's a map from 1902, shows the Empire of Austria and the Kingdom of Hungary. You can see up there. There's Bosnia right there. Here's Hungary. And I guess this is all Austria here, along with Dalmatia there, part of Croatia today. Here's the imperial eagle, the emblem of the dual monarchy. Yeah, you can see this eagle on a lot of flags and places still today. Here is a bust of Emperor Franz Joseph. This very epic beard here with his chin shaved, very stylish. This is a Bosnian newspaper reporting on the assassination. That's pretty cool. That's some good history there. Let's read about it. The multinational capital of Bosnia. Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina, was founded by the Ottoman Empire in the 15th century. When it fell under Austro-Hungarian control in 1878, Bosnia had a significant Muslim population and large communities of Christian Croats and Serbs. The Austrians wanted to make Sarajevo a multinational blend of old and new. The bazaar and the mosques remained, but a new city sprang up, boasting courts, schools, a city hall, and an electric tram. The Miljacka River was channeled, and the Apelquay was created on its north bank. This is where the attack occurred. So here's a photograph of Sarajevo in 1914. How interesting. You can still see, looks like a lot of wilderness around. But there's the main city out there, and there's the big river. And there's a picture here of the bridge where it happened, the Latin Bridge. The corner where Princip fired shots right there. And in this front page here, we have this very haunting photograph of Franz Ferdinand and Sophie leaving the city hall. Of course, moments before the assassination. You can see his plumed hat there. Very distinct. It's probably not a good idea to wear that. And then here's a picture of a, I guess, newspaper. Does it say? Yeah, newspaper. With art depicting the death of the Archduke and his wife there. The murders that changed history. Very interesting. Let me know if you learned any cool facts in this article that you didn't know before. So I bet you're going to learn something cool in this article about the Hello Girls, unsung heroines of World War I. Jumping ahead in history a bit toward the last few years of the conflict. Ethel Elkins was one of roughly 25,000 American women who volunteered in Europe during the First World War. But unlike most who served with the International Red Cross and other aid organizations, Elkins was one of the first female soldiers officially deployed to a combat zone as a uniformed member of the U.S. Army Signal Corps. An eager nation took note. How many girls do you know with the disposition of angels, who can add thereto a strong constitution, soldierly fortitude, a low musical voice, and ability to speak French just as fluently as English? Wrote a reporter in a 1918 Philadelphia newspaper article about Elkins. She was no girl, but her voice did matter. Her unit would serve as front-line telephone operators on the battlefields of France, translating, encoding, and deciphering critical messages between French and U.S. forces. Known informally as the Hello Girls, the 223 members of the Signal Corps Female Telephone Operators Unit were known for their efficacy, patience, and fearlessness on the battlefront. But despite their historic role and the significant publicity they elicited at the beginning of their military service, Elkins and her counterparts would later be denied veteran status and military benefits, with their efforts almost completely forgotten. But more than a century later, a bipartisan group of legislators introduced a bill for Congress to memorialize the Signal Corps Female Telegraph Operators Unit service with the nation's highest civilian honor, the Congressional Gold Medal. A nation calls its women. When the United States first entered the war in 1917, it had tried relying on French telephone operators to place calls to and from the front line. But issues with English proficiency and cultural differences prompted American officials to turn to their own servicemen to do the job. That failed too. The soldiers' lack of language proficiency and experience with switchboards soon became clear. The Army needed experienced operators, and most American telephone operators at the time were women. That year, General John Pershing put out a call for women interested in serving their country at the front. Soon the Army gathered a group of mostly bilingual operators, culled from single applicants who could pass psychological tests and Secret Service background checks. Subject to regular Army discipline, the women, who were an average age of 26, underwent military training, including drills and lessons on military history and terminology. The first group of 33 operators wearing U.S. Army uniforms of navy blue wool reported to the front in France in March 1918. On the front lines, the presence of American women on European battlefields made a splash from the start, and they immediately became known as the Hello Girls, a term with unknown origins that emerged with the growing popularity of the telephone in the early 20th century. They operated at 5 times the speed of their male counterparts, says Laura Vogt, Vice President of Education and Interpretation at the National World War I Museum and Memorial. And they maintained and provided the communications essential to Allied victory. The job was dangerous, historian Jill Fromm explains. The women often worked within range of German artillery, transmitting coded messages, directing supplies, connecting commanding officers with men in the trenches, and even getting communications working when the fighting damaged wires. The Army Expeditionary Force's telephone operators were a trusted part of the military machine, writes Fromm, something no group of women had ever been before. That did not mean their service was easy, or that they were sheltered from misogyny at the front. As historian Elizabeth Cobbs documents in her book, The Hello Girls, America's First Women Soldiers, women felt their efforts were hampered because they were stationed too far from the front, while others dealt with opposition to their presence in the field from many commanding officers. In 1918, the female soldiers formally protested the nickname Hello Girls, resulting in a War Department directive to respectfully call them the Signal Corps Female Telephone Operators Unit instead. No, it's such a mouthful. Goodness. In 1919, the San Francisco Chronicle published the experience of a Miss Louise Le Breton. Quote, "For 6 months she sat at a switchboard at General Headquarters answering the calls that General Pershing and his staff sent to all the units in the Army in France, while the great American drives were in progress, and after the armistice she was sent to Paris, where she was one of the operators on the switchboard by which President Wilson's private residence was connected with the American Peace Conference staff. A sister, Miss Raymond Le Breton, is still on the Peace Conference switchboard and may not come home until the treaty is signed. Both girls were under fire in Paris from the German long-range guns during a week in March 1918 and often had to take refuge in their bomb-proof cellar." End quote. Forgotten firsts. Though hundreds of American female telephone operators served in France through 1920, just one of them was decorated by the Signal Corps. As Cobbs notes, most of the women didn't realize the U.S. government did not see them as soldiers until they attempted to apply for the same types of benefits offered to male military members and veterans, including combat bonuses, pensions, and military funerals. They weren't even reimbursed for their uniforms, which the army had made them purchase with their own money. Only in 1977, after a lawsuit and legislation, were the women granted veteran status over the objections of the Army, the Veterans Administration, and even the American Legion. That's crazy. Today, supporters of the Hello Girls say that the efforts of 1977 didn't go far enough. In their legislation, reintroduced in May 2024, the bipartisan group from the House and Senate called for the women to be awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. Endorsed by the American Historical Society, the American Legion, thankfully, and others, the law, successfully enacted in December 2024, now officially recognizes the women's service during what co-sponsor Representative Emanuel Cleaver II calls a time of grave uncertainty. The move may be seen as too little too late by some, but Vogt says it highlights the importance of the story, not just within classrooms or in history books, but in the national conversation. These American women were crucial in the Allied victory of World War I, she says. To receive this posthumous honor will help recognize the not equal but superior work the women within the Signal Corps Female Telephone Operators Unit contributed to the war effort. Great story, isn't it? It's a sad ending, but at least they've had their what am I trying to say? At least they're recognized nowadays. So this is a photo taken for a newspaper. And it says, they arrived just the other day, and like everything else that's new in the Army, yes, they're in it too, they were lined up before a Signal Corps camera. Grouped about the base of a statue in a little Paris square, they presented a pleasing sight. American girls always do. Goodness. But yeah, this is a really spiffy uniform. Of course, they're wearing skirts because it's 1918, but they have cool hats to go with it too. Let's see, changing roles. Women were urged to help the war effort in a variety of traditional roles. Although posters encouraging women to offer their services as nurses and knitters of military clothing were familiar across the U.S. from 1917, the idea of women participating in military activity was controversial. Newton D. Baker, Secretary of War, was uncomfortable with women working in military settings. The pressure of war, however, was changing attitudes. In 1917, under Josephus Daniels, the U.S. Navy became the first in the world to recruit women, but only to serve at home. The Hello Girls were the only women permitted in a near frontline role, keeping the channels of communication open during offensives and being exposed to danger. The notion of girl soldiers in the headline at right was a new and radical one. Yeah, here's a cool newspaper clip. You can see them at their switchboard, and the headline is Brave Girl Soldiers of the Switchboard. And then there's some more posters here. Lady Knitting says you can help, American Red Cross. And there's a nurse, says 5,000 by June. Graduate nurses, your country needs you. Let's see what this says. From flags to phones. The secret of war, Napoleon taught, lies in communication. Just before the American Civil War, the U.S. Army established its Signal Corps, which rapidly developed with emerging telephone technology. By the First World War, when teams of uniformed women ran the switchboards, the Signal Corps were also responsible for producing and interpreting aerial photography. There's a picture of their cool lapel pin, which has, signal flags on it, and like a big old torch. Various signals of history, right? See, this box says Amazing Grace. Born in New Jersey in 1892, Grace Banker majored in French and history before working for AT&T, making her an ideal candidate for the 1917 recruitment of military switchboard operators. Posted to France, Banker's team of Hello Girls supplied crucial communications support during the decisive Meuse-Argonne offense of 1918. She received the Distinguished Service Medal, but, in common with all the Hello Girls, received no veterans' benefits. She died in 1960, almost 20 years before Signal Corps women are finally granted veteran status. There's a picture of her here in a very snappy uniform and hat and gloves. Here is a YWCA poster. It says, "Back our girls out there." There's a picture of working on the switchboard. And here's a photograph of them working on the switchboard here. It says, "American women of the U.S. Army Signal Corps operate the switchboard at the Élysée Palace Hotel, Paris." This photo was taken in January 1919 in the aftermath of the Allied victory in the First World War. Very cool articles tonight. All right, my cat is crying at the door. He wants to come in, probably because he found a moth in here today and he ate it and he's looking for more moths. So let's come and see if there's any more bugs. So let's wrap this up. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, if you want to pick future magazine articles, you can click the join button just down there. Or if you're on mobile and there is no join button, you can click the first link in the description box. I hope that you found this video to be relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a good